Hello, welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about should attendance in college classes be mandatory? What do you think?
No.
No, I agree.
No.
I don't think so either.
I think that if you are paying for college, you're paying to be there. I don't think it should be something that is mandatory, especially like having it affect a grade. I've only taken a few classes where attendance was necessarily like a grade, but I do think it's kind of dumb how that works. I do think it's kind of like I have been in some classes where like attendance wasn't mandatory, but you got like some like extra credit for showing up to class.
If you were there.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think it should be mandatory at all. I mean, my whole philosophy, and this is how my professor's always been with college, is if you don't make the grade, that's your fault, not theirs. If you don't want to show up to class and do what you need to do to pass, that's on you. But at the same time, there's also students who they don't need to show up to class. Either they already know a lot about it, maybe it's just something they're passionate about, so they're so far ahead. They don't need to come in and listen to the lecture because they're already 3 chapters ahead of everyone else because they're just
I think something that I think about is like I'm super good with like cameras and photography. So if I just take like a photography 101 class just for the quick easy A
you need
and
credit.
Attendance was required, I'd be like, I know all of this, I don't need to necessarily be here, and I could just like come in on test days and like be 100% fine. But I've never had a professor where they didn't allow students to take a test if they just didn't show up. I know that I think it was for my history class. Our professor just gave us a point. I did have a class where he showed up and you got points for showing up to the class, but it was like a 2.5 hour class, which was horrific. And then typically in this classes you get a middle break, and for this class he kind of caught on to it. So you got a point for being there for the first half. And then during intermission, like he like redid attendance to see who like
if you actually stayed.
Yeah. But other than that, I never really had any too strict ones. But it does really suck when, let's say you're just more busy within the quarter, so you can't show up to class as often, and then attendance is a grade, and then come to the end of the quarter, you're doing kind of fine. And the attendance grade hits, and then that's the thing that kind of drops you down. Yeah. There's not much you can really do to like fix that.
Yeah, you're just like, well, I'm screwed. What about, because we were talking about it a little bit earlier, what about a participation grade? Because that obviously requires you to be in class. And there are some classes where that participation might be needed. We're talking like, ASL. You need to be able to sign back and forth to people. You need to be able to communicate. Should that also be allowed? Or do you think that should be changed as well? Because for a lot of professors, that's necessary for you to learn. I mean, a lot of people learn best when they practice what they're teaching.
Yeah, I think for those kind of like language classes, attendance should be mandatory. But I also think like especially if there's a class that requires, I think also just if it's just like a regular class like an English 101 or something, obviously like attendance shouldn't really necessarily be mandatory. But unless like I think it should affect the grade if like there's a lot of group work and you're just not showing up in class.
Yeah.
I think then it should be affect your grade. So kind of going along with that, like a public speaking class, that's a class you kind of physically need to be there for.
Yeah.
If you don't show up, then there's not really much you can do. Like for when I took it, it was always just kind of like if you don't show up, then if you don't show up for your speech days, you can't really make that up at all. So I do think there's some classes where it should be mandatory, especially with the language ones. That's definitely a skill that you should like have to like physically express.
Yeah, and I think also like maybe for example like band or orchestra.
Yeah,
those, and that kind of goes with your group work when it's other people are going to rely on you and depend on you. You don't want to be just not there, and then they're going, well, what do we do? Our group member's not showing up. And I think maybe if a class doesn't regularly have attendance grades and then only introduces it for groups, that I think I'd be okay with, because that makes sense. I don't want people not showing up because they just want the group to handle it and they don't want to be responsible. But as a regular thing, I think it's a bit unfair to expect students to show up to every class. I know what teachers think they're teaching, it is important and it's good you know it. But if someone's doing well in the class, why require? Like, if they're passing their tests, if the work's getting turned in on time, why does it matter if they were in class or not?
Yeah, and another thing is like that got brought up was like running start students, like how attendance is like kind of mandatory for them, particularly because you're still technically in high school. And I think what I could be wrong, but from what I remember when I was in running start, the way they kind of regulated that was not necessarily the attendance in particular, but how many if you could only fail a certain amount of classes while being in running start in order to stay in it.
Yeah, you had to come back, or your GPA also, I think.
Yeah.
If it tanked,
so I feel like that's a good way to kind of, maybe a running start student takes a photography class, they already know everything, they don't really show up to the class that much. I mean, obviously they probably should show up to class, but as long as they're like getting the good grade, they're like they know what they're talking about, they know the subject matter, then I think it should be fine regardless.
Yeah. I don't even know how professors would report that, because I've skipped classes before for college.
I did full-time running start too, and I there was like many times where I just didn't make it to class or something.
Yeah, but I never heard about it from my high school, because I'm running start right now, and I skip classes, and I've never heard anything like, hey, why are you missing class? I mean, it's not like I'm missing, tons and tons of days, but there.
Which high school do you go to?
Emerald Ridge.
You hear that, Emerald Ridge? He misses class.
Just be like, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I'll miss a class, and they've never come to me about it. Be like, so why did you miss a class? I mean, I don't know if they report that. I don't know if they can look and be like, oh, there was a day he was gone.
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard. I think it's really hard to like really pinpoint that, because I would like to say that the majority of my college classes there was no like attendance. Like you just kind of showed up. Like I did take yoga, and yoga did take attendance because like there's not much to grade on yoga. You just show up, you stay there for the hour, you participate.
You get the grade, yeah.
Yeah, like there's nothing. There's not like a test or anything you take in that class. So, I understand like classes like that. As for anything else though, it's just like if you're paying for the class to take it, if you don't want to show up, that's kind of on you.
Yeah, exactly. You paid to be here, but if you don't want to, but I mean, running start students might not have that same motivation. Because for us, tuition's extremely cheap, maybe
a
couple $100 for 3 classes. They might blow it off. So maybe that's where they're concerned.
Yeah.
And like you said, because obviously they need to pass for the high school requirements. And maybe that's the thing, high school could be pressuring the college now that they're here, like, these students need to be showing up for class.
Yeah.
But they don't anyway.
At least for me, like when I did running start, it was especially senior year it was really tough, and I had to miss some of my classes because I had to do graduation stuff at the high school.
Right.
I had to set up an appointment with my counselor to get my EVF and stuff like that. So there was like a lot of like things I had to do that could have like prevented me to going to class. But to just kind of wrap this up, I think we both are at like agreement that like attendance shouldn't be required, but there is like some type of circumstances where like you should go to class, like, whether it's a group project, like a language class, PE, like things like that.
I just have one last thing I want to touch on, because I believe it's in our college, it's if you miss so many classes, eventually you do get dropped. I think that is a thing we have here, isn't it? Or I think, and that might be specific to professor, but I think if you have so many days that you just miss it, they'll automatically drop you from the course. I don't know if they still do that, but I remember they were saying the first day of class, if you didn't show up, you got dropped.
Huh.
Because my math professor, he emailed all of us. He said, make sure you're here, or tell me you're not going to be here, because they will automatically drop you from the class. So do you think that's something they should be allowed to do as well?
I think maybe for the first week, I think it should be put into consideration, because for me, it's kind of hard to. It's just like if there's like a full class and people are trying to get into that class and someone's like enrolled in it and just not showing up and not doing the work, then I can understand that.
Yeah, it's not fair.
But if like let's like for me, I had mono.
You had a fair reason.
Yeah, I could not at all show up the entire first and like half of the second week, so I ended up having to drop 2 of my classes. But like let's just say like I got mono like a few weeks prior, and I was like missing the first few days, like the first like 2-3 days of class,
Yeah.
and then I was like able to come. That would kind of suck, but I would definitely email my professor and be like,
Yeah,
hey,
I think if you let them know, I have valid reasons I'm going to be gone. But if you
Yeah.
just are not showing up,
yeah,
I think there is a point where they could be like, okay, especially like some that first week, if I really want to be in a class,
yeah,
some kid got it, and then he doesn't even show up for that. It's like, well, let me in, I guess, instead. But I think that's it. I think that's a good wrap up. What do I want to say?
Alrighty, join us on Friday for our Addams Family review, and join us next week for the Post Point podcast. And thank you all for watching.